Right guys, hello, another video for you all. Today it is the Sinden Light Gun. Had mine well over 2 years now. Really enjoyed it. Friends and family have too. It's still working, that's important to point out. I thought I really should get around to sharing my thoughts. Now more so than ever it's important because there's even more options on the market. It's getting very confusing knowing what to get. All these alternatives claiming to be the best light gun available. So let's break the video down with timestamps. That gives you chapters, help you find what you want to see. Useful links can go in the description of the video. In fact, all of that, the timestamps, the links, can go in a pinned comment below. Now, some of you are going to be very short on time. I appreciate that. So we'll start with a very quick summary. Yes, I like the gun. It still works. Happy with what I paid for it. The accuracy is good. I'll give you some links to gameplay. Me and YouTube videos. The misses that I make in the games, I blame myself more than the gun itself. Yes, you'll see the white border on the outside edges. That's how the gun works. No, it's not distracting when you're using it. You might notice the border as a spectator. When you're playing, you're looking at what you're supposed to be shooting, not the outer edges of the screen. Is it worth having the recoil? This is a recoil gun. Surprisingly, I'm going to say to you, probably not, no. 80 to 90% of the time I have it turned off on this gun. Why? The noise actually gets really annoying after a certain amount of time. But although it works well for semi-automatic single fire, it doesn't hold up the rhythm. It doesn't work well for fully automatic fire, the recoil. And by having that mechanism in the gun, it also makes it heavier, the actuator and the capacitor. So for children to hold this up straight with their arms out, they could struggle over time. So is it the best light gun on the market today? No, but silver, if not bronze medal. Gold probably goes to gun for IR. When this first came out, it blew the aim track guns out of the water. It still has its place. This 5 meter long USB cable for data and power actually makes it very, very portable. So I can pair this up with my Valve Steam Deck, throw this all in the bag, go to someone's house, have it set up within minutes. A gun for IR setup is going to be very static. You've got to measure out where to put these infrared emitters as part of the calibration. I'm not saying you can't move it around, but it's more hassle to move a gun for IR setup than it is the Sinden. So it still has its place. Maybe have both. I leave it up to you. Right, everybody else that wants to be with me for the long haul of the video, let's go over a history of the guns because the technology has changed and talk about the games. You can skip ahead if you like, but remember we need games to play with the gun. Many of them we're going to revisit from days gone by. Some of them aren't worth our time, but a lot do hold up today. So what is a light gun? It's obviously not a phaser from Star Trek. I'm not going to incinerate anybody I shoot with it. It's just a toy for me to play games, shoot characters on a TV screen or a monitor. It's a bit of harmless fun. Your memory of your favourite light gun game can be very different to mine. Depends how old we are. Maybe you're quite young. Your mum and dad took you to the arcades and you played Halo, Fireteam Raven or whatever it was called. There's lots of recent arcade games. I went to the arcades back in the 90s. They're much more prevalent. There's more of them around. And I would love playing Operation Wolf. And I didn't find out till many years later, it's not actually a light gun game. Some of you would be thinking, yeah, it is. I remember holding the mini Uzi. It's there in the picture on the cabinet, you idiot. Okay, it's got a mini Uzi, but it's not a light gun. That's actually a modified joystick. It was more expensive to create this cabinet with a modified joystick to begin with, but they clawed back the money over time on the maintenance and service costs because that's easier to maintain a joystick than a light gun based system. It's actually quite a few games like Terminator 2 and others we could mention are actually joystick based. Why am I talking about joysticks in a light gun video? Because Andy Sinden, the creator of the Sinden Gun, now acknowledges that many of these games were actually doing the movement based off a calibrated joystick. And with version 1.9 of the firmware of the Sinden Gun, we have that option to enable. So mouse coordinates normally for a light gun game, but for these joystick games, we can do that joystick mode. Fun facts about the old arcade cabinets. Interesting facts about how the Sinden Gun has developed over time. So I hinted that the technology would change over time. The technology is actually very old. It goes back to like the 1930s. Although some of us aren't really that old. The earliest thing I can really remember is the NES, the Nintendo Entertainment System, sometimes called the NES, and the Zapper. We're simplifying how it works, but it's taking the light from the CRT, the TV screen itself. So Unfortunately, even if you've kept your NES and your Zapper gun, they will not work with modern displays. Many of us moved on from those boxy CRTs to getting plasmas and LED and now OLED televisions. Unfortunately, we can't use the Zappers. That's where guns like the Sinden come into play. So a game synonymous with the Zapper was Duck Hunt. It's still worth playing today, and I know that because there's been recent reimaginings with it. I played it in VR. They've made it into a 360 game. So I've got ducks coming at me all around. Okay, the Zapper gun's gone, but my VR controller had a pistol grip, and it very much felt like playing the original game, although I was in a virtual reality environment. So yeah, we can emulate this with the Sinden, play it on our screens. Worth checking out. An old game that's really not worth our time, or games, would be the Action Max system. More of a thing in America than it was Europe. The games came on VHS tapes. So they looked very good. Good graphics for the time because it's filmed footage, it's photorealistic. The gameplay suffered because of the technology. Yes, we had the gun connected to this grey box, and we had that red disc that goes in front of the television. Graphics good, gameplay bad because it's always the same footage on a loop playing from the tape. You could shoot a plane or a helicopter, but it won't explode. Whether it's Pop's ghostly, the haunted house, the ghost is never going to disintegrate. So it can tell you, give you a score, or you've shot, the ghost 50 times, but it's going to get boring pretty quickly. So it's not something I would revisit today, unless you got a lot of nostalgia for it and you want to revisit it because you played it as a child. So all this stuff is still archived online. The emulator you're looking for would be Singe, Daphne, and Singe. You can play them. I'm going to say most people really shouldn't bother. Although the Action Max was limited by the technology of VHS, it wouldn't take long for us to get new technologies like Laserdisc, which is like a precursor to DVDs and Blu-rays. So now it can jump to scenes. It can be game-changing because it can alter what we see almost instantaneously. So some of you might remember the American laser games like Mad Dog McCree in its sequel, Crime Patrol in its sequel, Drug Wars, The Last Bounty Hunter, Who Shot Johnny Rock. I'm sure there's others I can't think off the top of my head. So the Laserdisc was game-changing. If we pulled the arcade cabinet apart, pulled the panels off to see what was going on, sometimes we had a very, very large screen. It was doing rear projection, so it was almost like life-size, the characters that were filmed. We'd find a Commodore Amiga hidden within the cabinet, which was a personal computer. I had one way back when. Very cool bit of kit, cool graphics, but by itself it couldn't do anything that was photorealistic, but it could control this Laserdisc player. So American Laser Games filled all these actors. They're not going to get an Oscar for their performance. It was very B-movie-ish, but the graphics were insane for the time, and the interaction was really, really good. We'd have our light gun hooked up to the Amiga. Within the gun was a mercury switch. What was the point of this? Well, if the game was, say, Quick Draw, Wild Wild West, it needs to know you're not cheating and that the gun barrel is facing down. And when it's down, the mercury switch is going to tell it that it's down. Also, for the reload, we're going to put the barrel down to do the reload. So the mercury switch can tell the Commodore Amiga to do the reload. When it came to playing the game, I could raise the gun, fire and shoot. And if I missed, it would know that. And then it could get the Laserdisc to change scene to the actor smoking barrel of the gun, smoking a cigarette, making a wisecrack, they've shot me dead. Or I raise the gun, fire, shoot, hit the target. They spin around 3 times, fall out the window, off the roof of the building, whatever it might be. But all of these scenes could be randomized as well. They could come from behind a different car, off behind the roof on a building. It can vary. So it was randomized, which just made it much more interesting than Action Max. So yeah, okay, the acting is not great, but they still can be fun to revisit today. We will use that Daphne and Singe emulator again, but what we're looking for are the Laserdisc versions, and some of them have been remastered in HD by the community. What we don't want is the games that were ported over to home consoles. We don't want the home console version because it uses CDs, CD-ROMs. The resolution is lower. Yes, we can find these home ports, but we don't want to use them because they just don't look good on modern displays. So something to keep in mind. Always look for the Laserdisc version, not the Mega CD, Sega CD, Panasonic 3DO. Play it if you want to, but you'll see what I mean about how badly it looks on modern displays. So if I did the word association game and said to people, you know, what two words come into your head when I say light gun, most people will say time crisis. Games like synonymous with light guns. Again, it was in the arcades, but it was also ported to home consoles like the PlayStation 1. I remember well, because my girlfriend at the time said, I don't know what to get my brother for his birthday. I said, buy him that, GunCon, Time Crisis for his PlayStation 1. Now, back then, we used to go to the arcades for a reason, because the arcade always looked better than what we could own at home. This actually changed over the years, and home consoles would start to make their way into the arcades and be hidden within the cabinets. But back for the original Time Crisis, it added in this foot pedal. We'd press to come out of cover to shoot, and we'd come off the pedal to take cover and reload. The pedal never made it onto the PlayStation 1 version. We'd push a button on the gun. But many of us, when we think of Time Crisis, we always think of having that pedal. So if we want to emulate it, replay it again today, Time Crisis 1, look for the arcade version, not the PlayStation 1 version. But later Time Crisis games did come onto home consoles. We can emulate those. So I think we're up to Time Crisis 5, like the most recent arcade version we can play on Windows PCs. We use the Technopower arcade loader. That actually wants us to move left or right for cover, complicating things a little bit. So I bought myself a triple pedal setup. It was only about £30 to cover me to do that. So it's an awful lot of fun. So we said the technology would change over time, and eventually moved on to using infrared emitter bars. So Nintendo with the Wii and their motes, they had a little optical sensor. It was kind of gimmicky using these controllers, but lots of people enjoyed it. It didn't take people long to realise, oh, we can make a cradle that looks like a pistol grip and drop that Wiimote in there, and whammo, we've got a light gun. So you'd see an awful lot of light gun style games come to the Nintendo Wii that we want to check out. Now, some of you might still have that kit up in the loft. You can go check. You might be missing your IR bar though. That is what makes it all work. And people discovered, necessity being the mother of invention, that those little tea light candles, you can light those and they can work as a DIY infrared bar. Crazy, but it's absolutely true. So go dig that stuff out. You can use that today. It's not as accurate as the Sinden, but if you think, oh, these games are actually an awful lot of fun, maybe you do want to spend a little bit of money, get a better gun like the Sinden. So lots of games on the Wii to explore for gun game, light gun fun. Right, let's focus on the actual Sinden gun. It's about time I got around to that. We've got two buttons on one side of the gun, another two buttons on the other side, as well as a D-pad, up, down, left and right. We've got a pump action under the barrel. This is paired to one of the buttons though, so whichever button it is, if it's reload or fires a grenade, that is what the pump will also do. They share the same function. We obviously have a trigger to pull to fire. There's quite a lot of travel, long way you have to pull before it actuates. Some people do like to mod the trigger. It's not bad, but some people like to modify it. We've got about 5 meters of USB cable for data and USB. There is no moving barrel, it's fixed. If you choose the Recoil version, it's still a fixed barrel. You see this little thing on the ends to signify it's a toy. It's not an actual dust cap. It would have been nice if we had something to protect the lens of the camera, but we don't. And that's how it works, by having a camera in the end of the barrel. It is looking for a border around the outside edges of the screen. It's important we're about 1.5 times the distance, like the width of the screen away, to let that camera see the entire border. If I aim to one corner, it won't necessarily see all of the border over there. So we need to be far enough back to give the camera a good view. This is the Recoil version of the gun. I'm not a big fan of it. We'll talk about that a little bit later. We'll have a dedicated chapter. There's no relief cut in the grip. It's very boxy. I assume they did this so it's ambidextrous for left or right-handed people. It's not a big deal. I don't have particularly big hands, but it's just quite boxy and not that comfortable to hold. But it's not the end of the world. But yeah, just feel worth mentioning. So as we're on the Sinden Store, let's start talking through the options. You can just buy the non-recoil version for about 90 Great British pounds. wherever you are in the world, it'll be a different currency, and it might take a little bit longer to ship out to you. We've got the Recoil version for 140, an extra £50. You buy it in blue, red, black, grey. It's really up to you, but I would suggest not bothering with the Recoil version of the gun. We can buy them as a 2-pack. Why would you want to do that? Well, obviously player 1, player 2. More so, it's so the guns don't conflict with each other. I've bought this gun, whatever it was, over 2 years ago. I could buy another gun today, have it turn up to find out it's got the same camera ID as the gun I've already owned, and so they conflict with each other. So we can change this in the software, like customer services can talk you through it. It's not the end of the world, but if you know you want 2 guns, might be a good idea to just buy 2 in the pack so they know to ensure that the camera IDs are different. They have some accessories like the custom holster, so if you do have an arcade cabinet you use at home, you can mount your guns nicely on the side of it. You can buy a pair of them for a slight discount. They've also got the arcade pedal. It's a silly amount of money, 200 Great British pounds. It's nice, it's checker plated, it looks like the original Time Crisis pedal, but that's an awful lot of money. I'm sure I mentioned earlier, I went on Amazon, Icagol triple pedal set was £30–35. Okay, it's plastic, but that's 3 pedals, not 1. It was more versatile. I think they missed a trick with the Sinden pedal. They should have at least made it a double pedal, split it down the middle. So we've got games like Time Crisis 5 where it wants you to either go to the left or to the right, but also you could have used it for 2-player games as well, so players can share the pedals. Okay, they could do the double pack with a slight discount, but £380 on 2 pedals is insane. I am confident I could DIY it. I could get checker plate, offcuts and build a pedal for less than that. So I appreciate that they're there, and those people that have bought it, fair play to you. You've got deeper pockets than I have, but that's a lot of money for something I'm only going to use occasionally. Like those of you that go with the non-recoil gun and then change your mind and I wish I had got the recoil, got the fear of missing out, you can buy the kit and fit it yourself. You pay the £50, which is the difference. You're only out of pocket slightly by paying the shipping costs of them sending the recoil kit out to you. It's not that easy to find on the Sinden Store, so I'll give you the link to help you easily find it. But I stress this again, I'm not a massive fan of the recoil on the gun. So let's do the chapter to explain why. This is the Sinden YouTube channel. I'll give you a link to it. They talk about the hardware, the gun, all kinds of things. This will help you fit the recoil kit if you want it. But I'm not sold on it. It works well for single action semi-automatic fire. So early Time Crisis, Virtual Cop, early House of the Dead stuff. Where it falls down is the fully automatic fire. It goes from being a clack to an annoying click, and it stutters. It just doesn't sound right. It's the technology that they've used, I think, was a questionable choice. Almost any other light gun on the market will have dedicated power for the recoil system. The Sinden, it's all done through the cable, the USB cable for data and power. So we can see this gun stripped down in the pistol grip. It's hard to see, but there is a capacitor there. If you don't know what a capacitor is, think battery. It can recharge itself incredibly quickly, but it also discharges itself pretty fast. And that's what's powering an actuator. It's just like a metal bolt with a spring on it. That's what's going to make that clacking noise. So it's interesting to see the insides of the gun, but let's bring up the Sinden software so I can demo the recoil to you. So it says, I accept the terms and conditions of recoil functionality because it makes a loud click. Don't put it up to someone's ear. I've enabled it. We're just going to do it off the trigger. You can do it for off-screen reload. You can have it activate on the pump action. You can adjust the strength by changing the voltage. We've got the trigger recoil style. So normal is semi-automatic fire. Automatic is holding it down for fully automatic. And then we've got the automatic settings. So someone might be typing away in the comments saying, well, I've got it and I think it's great. You can tweak the settings. The fully automatic fire is fine. That's your opinion and you're entitled to it, but I don't agree. No matter how I've tweaked these settings for automatic recoil, I'm not happy with it. We've got a button to test the recoil. We've got a button to start the fully automatic recoil and a button to stop the test of fully automatic recoil. So as I've said, for single fire, what we're going to do, maybe 6 shots from a revolver. You might just, double tap. Get a nice strong clack from it. Fair enough. You come off the trigger, it's got enough time to recharge the capacitor. When we get into fully automatic fire, that's where it struggles. So we've got some presets. We can do the single shot, which we've just done. There's the mixed mode, which is like the best of both. We can pull the trigger, hold it down, and you'll get a single recoil. And then after a couple of seconds, if you've still got the trigger held down, it realizes, oh, you're trying to do fully automatic fire. Then it kicks in, starting to do fully automatic recoil. We've got some presets here for fully automatic recoil, so fast, default, and strong. So when you go to fast, you can see that the strength of the pulse has gone way, way down. The speed, the delay between the pulses is also shortened, and we've got no delay after the first pulse. Might be able to hear that starting to stutter. So again, not a clack, more of a click, quite annoying sound, and then it starts to stutter, doesn't keep rhythm. If I go to default, it's obviously going to be a stronger pulse, and we've got more of a delay between the pulses, a different rate of fire. So we get a stronger thwack at the start, but we quickly lose that, and it just degrades into a clicking noise, which I don't find particularly pleasant. And then we've got strong, so just more strength, adjusting the rate of fire. You can hear it starting to stutter. So in real life, if we were firing fully automatic, you'd do it in short bursts, control it. Many of these arcade games you play, they just expect you to hold the trigger down for very, very long periods of time. So yeah, actually full automatic recoil on the gun does matter how it does it. As we are on the Sinden software, this isn't meant to be a tutorial, but we can do an overview of the software. It's come a long way from the beginning. If you had 2 guns, you actually had to have 2 instances of this open, one for each gun, which was insane. Luckily, we don't have to do that anymore. You can see we've got these black boxes. That should be showing what the cameras are doing on the gun, but it's asleep at the moment. So I can turn off the raw video. I don't need to see, the color camera footage, but you can turn on the process video. So that camera is looking for the white border. As soon as it recognizes it, you'll see a blue box, which is the gameplay where it's trying to calculate where you're aiming. We've got camera control, so we can adjust the contrast, the brightness, and the exposure to help the camera see the border. All our rooms will be different, the amount of glare and light we have in the rooms. It says these settings apply to both light guns. So we've got the gangster mode, and so you don't just have to hold the gun upright, you can do it side on. Bonus points if you hold onto your crutch at the same time. That can be done on an auto mode. Yeah, it works incredibly well. We can do left on the D-pad for 3 seconds to bring up the calibration, and we can change how long it takes for the gun to go to sleep. We've got off-screen reload enabled or disabled. We can enable that joystick movement. How I said Operation Wolf, Terminator 2 were based off joystick movement. They weren't strictly speaking a light gun. As of version 1.9, we've got that as an option. We can push up on the D-pad on the gun for 5 seconds if you've got the recoil version to turn the recoil off, single fire or fully automatic as of version 1.9 of the firmware. I don't turn on the joystick movement because it doesn't work with Batocera, which is a custom Linux operating system I like to use, basically plug and play for the light gun. So the next tab, we can make some adjustments to the thickness of the border, how you want to do things. We've got the button assignments, so more often than not it's all about like emulating a mouse, but we can change what these buttons do. So if you want it's usually the middle mouse click, which will do a grenade in Operation Wolf. You don't want it to be the rear left button, you want it to be the pump. You can remap what the controls do. We've done the recoil tab. You can save and update your settings there. Calibration, so we hold left on the D-pad for about 3 seconds. Your mouse cursor will jump into the center of the screen. You're meant to aim at it. So your front sight post goes on the cursor. That front post goes in the gap between the 2 posts at the back. So that's you aiming, pull the trigger, get it done within seconds. We can do the cursor offset if you want to tinker around with that. We've got a firmware update, so I can't even remember what my gun came with. I've changed it so many times over the years. But we can choose our light gun to update it. We can adjust the camera ID. Those of us that are unfortunate enough to buy a second gun that has the same camera ID as our first. So we've got program and Arduino for the original PlayStation console mods, kinds of things to tinker around with. I don't want the video to go on too long. We do have a pedal section. Those of you that buy the expensive Sinden pedal, for you to configure it here. And an about tab telling us where to get Sinden support and the version of the software. So whilst we're talking of the software, that's another thing that I'm slightly disappointed with. It does actually work in Windows, but those of you that do your homework, you might have come across MameHooker, and you might have without even realizing it. So you might see some people doing gun for IR, and they have some really fancy looking guns. So the barrel moves with the recoil, but more than that, if they're playing House of the Dead and they fire the 6 shots, until they reload, the gun will stop recoiling. It won't fire anymore because it knows you're out of bullets. The game has told the gun, no more bullets, mate. You can't recoil. So it's unfortunate that MameHooker doesn't officially work with the Sinden software. It can do because someone has modded the Sinden software. They did this in March 11th, 2024. They released it. They said this is a modded version. Don't use it to update your Sinden Gun, but they've modded some other emulators to play games that can work with their modded version of the Sinden software to have MameHooker working. So they've even provided the MameHooker DLL to make it work with MameHooker. So those people that worry, oh, I don't want to download that, it could be a virus. The reason things get put on GitHub is for the source code to be there for everybody to see. It'd be really stupid to put a virus in code that you're letting everyone see, and they can fork off and make their own variation of it off the source code. So there's the DLL. I'll give you the links to this. I'm not going to give you support for it, but I'm just making you aware it's an option, and it's really disappointing, like basically a year later, that none of this has been incorporated into the official Sinden software. So there's also QMameHook, which is based on Linux operating system, and I know the Batocera developers are keeping a very, very close eye on this alternative to MameHooker. So this mentions using like open fire guns, gun for IR, Blamcom. There's no mention of Sinden, but we'll see how things pan out over time. So having mentioned Batocera a few times, might gather I quite like it. They've tried to make it as plug and play as possible. They give us the operating system, we supply the game files. That's how you should do it. Avoid pre-made collections you can down or buy. Worse, don't buy them online. You won't get support from the Batocera developers because of the rules. As we scroll down, we get the light gun comparison. Now, I've not tried every light gun there is, but I don't need to. I'm going to mispronounce his name, Tavarich, but he's the light gun guy in the Batocera team, and he's used an awful lot of them. And his opinion means more to me than, you know, various YouTube content creators trying to, you know, sell products. So he does this 5-star rating based off, you know, the calibration. Does it work properly? You know, does it hold calibration? Is it accurate up to the very edge, to the corners of your screen? Does it work on position? So, okay, I might calibrate it standing here, but then I'm using the pedal, so I move away from where I calibrated. You know, how well does the gun work if you're moving around? Or rotate the gun. We talked about that gangster mode. There's the latency, like how quick the aim's going to work. If you go off screen to reload, how quickly does it realize that to do the reload? All of these things factor together to give you the 5-star score. So we've got the AE Light Gun, and I remember him saying on the Discord, it's awful, don't use it, but he's given it a 2-star rating. So it says requires at least 9 feet, 3 meters of space to use, has calibration issues, requires multiple attempts before it will apply. So as we've said with the Sinden, with its camera, it's trying to look for a border. We'll see later on, it wants to be 1.5 times the width of the screen away from the left bezel to the right bezel, not the diagonal size of your screen. We're measuring it from left to right. So yeah, to be 3 to 3.5 times, that can be insane. Some people have a 55-inch screen, sometimes 70, and that's just insane. You have to have a very, very big room. So we've got the Ultimark aim track. That's 2 stars as well. They are really old guns. The Sinden, I know, blows them out of the water. I never bought them back in the day because I'd see people use them. They weren't particularly good. So they're using infrared emitters. You got to be 2 to 2.5 times the width of the screen away. It says it has calibration issues, requires multiple attempts before it will apply. Yeah, they were never fantastic back in the day. It's more of a gimmick than how you really wanted to play the games. The Blamcom light guns are actually quite recent, so we could go on their website, but the store is basically closed. They've taken so many orders, they're not taking any more for now till they catch up. So it's an interesting project. They're doing like replica guns, so Robocop's gun, which is basically a Beretta with an extended barrel. All kinds of other versions out there. I think they were trying to do the pulse rifle from Aliens as well, but they can give you like files to 3D print the gun, and then you do it all as a DIY project. You can buy the hardware and do all the soldering and get the infrared emitters to do it yourself. So the price can vary. Not everybody has a 3D printer, so you know, you might have to source someone online that will do it for you. There is no star rating. It's still early days. I don't think Tavarich has a Blamcom gun yet. Those developers really should get it to him, because Batocera really is the go-to way to get things done with light guns. So when he knows more, he'll share his opinion. So start talking about the Wiimotes. We mentioned this earlier in the video. For Batocera, this is how it all began, the light gun support. One of the developers thought, wouldn't it be great if I could play Duck Hunt again just using a Wiimote? It was only ever meant to be the one game with the Wiimote, and that's morphed into us playing all kinds of different games from many different systems with all types of different guns. It's kind of crazy how things have snowballed. But yeah, there's different ways of doing it. There's the Dolphin bar, which gets given 1 star. And then we've got the direct Wiimote gun with an infrared bar, which gets 3 stars. So again, it's kind of gimmicky. It's not great, but it is technically wireless, the gun. You might already own it, so it can be a very, very cheap way to get up and going with light gun games. So it's an option, but it's not the best. Let's talk about the Fusion light gun. That gets given 3 stars. So again, 2.5 times the width away. That's quite a long way. Price can vary if you're going to DIY it or buy it pre-assembled. Then we've got Gun for IR, which many people consider to be cream of the crop, the tippy top, and I'm not going to argue with them. It's got 5 stars for a reason. And again, the price can vary if you're going to DIY it or get a pre-assembled gun. And you'll see, I mentioned it earlier, the people doing the arcade accurate Time Crisis guns with the moving slide for the recoil. The case for that plastic gun alone is expensive, never mind adding the internals, the actuator, and so on. But yeah, works incredibly well. You can have a fisheye lens so you can get closer to the screen. So if we go to JB's website, so if I check the pre-modded guns, so it's going to say, for me it's a UK exclusive, although that's euros, not Great British pounds. 225 euros, I don't know what's that, about £190. I think I've got to add an AC adapter for the recoil, but I mean, it's not unreasonable money. I know the recoil is going to be better than the Sinden. In many ways, it's a far better gun. Certainly, if you're looking just for a static arcade cabinet, you know, set up and done. I like the Sinden because of the portable aspect of it. Then we've got the Namco Guncon 2. So this is with a cathode ray tube television. Those of you that kept hold of the old analog displays, that gets 5 stars because that old technology is incredibly good. So providing you've got the CRT TV, you can get hold of these old guns relatively cheaply. It might be getting harder now because people are buying them up to modify them to turn into Gun for IR and all these other different guns. So don't be surprised if the prices of second-hand guns start going up. So got the Guncon 3, which came with the PlayStation 3. Again, infrared emitters, and that's 3 stars. But it's really interesting how Gun for IR also uses infrared emitters, but JB has managed to nail it, get it working incredibly well, and everybody else really seems to be struggling using infrared emitters. So we've got the open fire. So when it starts talking about the Samco Light Gun, it's all about a DIY project. I'm sure I've got a tab open for it. You know, we are open fire. So yeah, I can freely print my own gun, call it the Hono Blaster 3000, and use this open source software to make my own light gun with the Arduino micro boards. It's really up to you the way you go. There's the retro shooters there. So that, again, infrared emitters. If you use 2 of them, you get 2-star rating. 4 infrared emitters, it's up to 3 stars. So yeah, it says full support starts in version 42 of Batocera, so that's not out quite yet. We're in version 41 at the moment. 42 is in beta. Recoil can actually be disabled or put to single shot. 2IR requires massive distance or a fish lens. Full support for the RS1 and RS2 starts in version 39. Full support for the Reapers starts in version 42. So I see a lot of people trying to use those recently, but I'm going to stick with my Sinden. We've mentioned that the Samco became the open fire. It's kind of morphed into that project. There's our Sinden Light Gun. So it works by a white border on the display. We've got 4 stars, 1.5 times the width of the screen away, nearly 5 meters of cable, plenty of cable. Price varies whether you've got recoil or not, and it says recoil can optionally be disabled, requires shrinking the game screen to the display the white borders, has limitations on how many guns can be used per USB hub. So they tend to recommend, you know, plugging it directly into the motherboard if you're using it on a computer rather than using USB hub. So talk about the X Gunner as well, which is also infrared. That only gets 3 stars. That's wireless or a USB dongle. So that's interesting that we're getting another wireless option, much like the Wiimote. But as I've said, Gun for IR is up at the tippy top, and then we've got, you know, the Sinden coming in very, very close, silver, if not, you know, bronze. It really depends how you want to look at it. If we stick with actually using Batocera to play the games, it's worth reading the wiki, knowing what's going on, and it works incredibly well for almost everything. We're not going to be able to do really modern games, and because we're trying to do that in Windows. And there are some emulators. I think it's the Sega Model 2. The emulator is basically dead, has been for a while, and it's meant for Windows. So getting that to work in Linux is a bit of a pain in the arse. So a lot of it we can do in Batocera. They're starting to add support for the Sega Lindbergh. So that'll be even more arcade games coming, like Rambo, Too Spicy, some of the House of the Dead games, the more recent ones. So that's all very, very exciting. But yeah, do a lot of it. I try to think of the retro stuff I do in Batocera, the more modern stuff I do using RetroBat and a Windows PC to do Techno Parrot. Model 2, Sega Model 2 is easy to do in Windows. So you can dual boot a computer to do both, to boot into Windows or boot into Batocera. It's not as complicated as you might think. I'm a massive fan of what the guys are doing with Batocera. Can't thank them enough. So we can see all of the different emulators supported and the different systems. So even, you know, like the Atomis Wave was an arcade machine, but that was the emulator we used is actually based off the Sega Dreamcast. As I said, our consoles would actually end up in the arcades hidden inside those cabinets over time. So awful lot of systems, awful lot of games we can play. It's certainly worth owning the light gun. So we did kind of mention the distance you need to be away from the screen varying on the gun. So I actually did this on the Batocera Discord. I took common screen sizes, their diagonal size, and then measured them, got the measurements, and then did it in feet. And everybody was saying, why have you done it in feet? That was silly. I said, no, it's not. Not everybody has a tape measure, but almost everybody has 2 feet. So you could stand by your screen, put your foot down and put your heel in front of your toe, pace it out, counting your feet to get the distance roughly away from the screen that you need to be. So I've got a 42-inch screen. I need to be on that back wall to use this gun. Had I bought the 48-inch screen, which I very nearly did, I'd have to open up that door and go stand out on the landing for the camera to be able to see all of the screen as I aim around. So maybe I'll include that in the description of the video to help people out. With the Sinden, it's 1.5 times, but we'll include this website so you can calculate it yourself if you want to. So let's leave the video there, guys. I hope it has helped you out. Have a great day, have a great evening, whatever it is you choose to do after watching this. And as always, I'll see you when I see you next. Ciao for now.